Welcome to SSI Security Speaking Podcast. I'm Editor-in-Chief Scott Goldfine. You know, it's not an easy task to clearly define the role of a project manager and then go out and find the right person to fill that role for your company. So then, what are the characteristics of the perfect project manager? Is it organizational expertise, customer service soft skills with clients, technical proficiency, or all of the above? Likewise, what tools such as software are necessary for that project manager to be successful? Those are some of the questions answered in this week's podcast as Chief Content Officer Jason Knott spoke with simPRO's Enterprise Account Manager Param Singh. Be sure to subscribe to SSI's YouTube channel. Hit the like button, share, and leave comments. Or subscribe to SSI's Security Speaking Podcast on Apple and Spotify. And leave us a review. Thank you.
You know, project management is an often overlooked role that goes unfilled by many security integrators. And in fact, it's terrible because it's really a billable line item that they can charge their customers for. But it can be difficult to find that defined role for a project manager, and then even more difficult to determine exactly what the tools they need to manage that project from start to finish, to purchasing, to inventory, to installation man hours, billable time, and eventually to service and monitoring. So with me today to talk about the role of project management and really talk specifically about a software tool from simPRO that can help integrators have better project managers on their team is Param Singh, Enterprise Account Manager at simPRO. Hey, Param.
Hey, Jason. Thank you for having me on. Do we have enough time to cover all this stuff?
Yeah, I hope so. Thanks for joining the Security Speaking podcast today. So, okay, let's kind of set the stage a little bit. When we say project management, what does that entail to you? What does that definition mean to you?
Good question. I think, project management applies to so many different industries, but when you're looking at it, it's simply being able to execute on a large quantity of work that all ties together. We look at a security integrator, so many of them are working with commercial contractors, residential homeowners, and these jobs are taking multiple days, multiple weeks, maybe even years to complete. And so when you look at that, it's going to take an entire team, it's going to take an entire collective to execute on that job to deliver for the client. That's what a project is. And I've already said a lot to it, but man, does that sound complex. There's a lot of work that's going to go into, doing a year-long job, a 2-year-long job.
What do you think is the more important element there? Is it that interface with the customer, or is it the interface with their team, or is it just the logistics of getting the project pulled together?
That's one of those trick questions. There's not one that's more important than the other. You have to be able to give equal attention to all of those. If you want the project to be successful, you have to be able to, deliver to the client, communicate with them. Most times these jobs never go according to plan. So you now have to manage the client, but then you also have to manage the team, right? People that are doing the job on the field, the people that are back in the office helping you do all the admin work, the people that are getting all your parts, so all of the materials that you need to complete it. So there's a lot of pieces that you have to juggle, right? At the end of the day, your business, you want to make it profitable. So someone's got to be really good at putting all those together, and you really can't give one attention or more attention than the other.
So I know a lot of integrators, for good or for bad, when they create a project management role within their company, a lot of times they take, quote unquote, their best technician or their lead technician, the guy who's highly skilled at the getting that job done and performing the installation. But that now he's got to kind of migrate and become that, as you just described, that people person and all these other roles. So, and then I've talked to other integrators who've told me that sometimes the person they make the project manager is too nice, quote unquote. They really have to be more rigid from a standpoint of adhering to the schedule and those sorts of things. So what is what is it that an integrator should be looking for in that person that they elevate to be a project manager for their team?
It's a really good question. One of my colleagues described it really well recently. She said a project manager is somebody who loves chaos. At the end of the day, you have to be organized. These are just intangible skills to be a successful project manager, but you have to be organized. You have to be a little detailed. You have to be able to understand the larger picture and know what needs to be done, how to track what's being done, and then how to react based upon that. But the most important skill, in my opinion, is being able to then make a decision, right? Things are constantly changing. Again, things are never going according to plan. Customers aren't always the easiest people to deal with. Their expectations, their ideas change often. And now the project scope has changed. So being able to make that quick adjustment, be able to go in and change the scope of the project on the fly, communicate to that, to your teams, change the plan. That's a lot of work. That's a lot of stress that you can take on. So someone who's good at dealing with that and moving quickly is going to be the best project manager. And it could be a technician, right? Those are intangible skills. Your job experience doesn't matter. More so your skills that you have matter.
I think one of the more unique areas to me is that in many cases, we talked about that lead technician, let's just say, who's really skilled at the installation process of the project. But the project manager is dealing with managing this project way before the installation even starts. The design part of it, the purchasing part of it. And then, of course, there's the after installation portion of the monitoring and the service. Give me a sense of from the integrators you deal with, is it effective to have that project manager also be overseeing the project after installation, or should then at that point be trying to transfer to a service role?
I think that's dependent on the size of the company. The benefit of having a project manager is you have somebody who is a point of contact for the client. They build that relationship. They can maintain it over the course of time. So it definitely helps to have that transition from the sales team onto the service, and that project manager sits in the middle. I always like to think of a project manager as the conductor of an orchestra. They're putting all these pieces together, right? Everything is needed to get this completed, but I've always seen it as once a project is completed, they've done their job. If they've done it well, all the information that our service is going to need to now make this a long-term client, to service them for the future, that's a smooth transition if the project manager has done his work.
Let me ask you another kind of tricky question. I'm this master of trick questions today, I guess. So does it need to be a certain sized project to entail having a project manager? And you just mentioned the fact of larger companies. In many cases, that security integrator who's the entrepreneur who runs the business, he also manages all the projects. Yeah. At what point do you get where it's like, okay, I've got to have that project manager role from a company size and then also a project size?
Yeah, you see it all over. If a company's small enough, the owner just takes it on and puts it on his back and carries it on as a project manager. And as they grow, they bring somebody on. But the way that I see it is almost every job is a project. It has to be completed, and there are multiple things that you have to manage in order to complete that job. Now, if we built up a good system to manage a 2-year-long project, we know how to get it completed. We know how to manage the customer. We know how to manage our internal team. And we can do it all and be profitable on the job. Why would we not take that same system and apply it to a smaller project, something that lasts maybe a week or a couple weeks? Right? Once you build a system, it's going to allow you to now repeat it and apply it to other parts of the business. And that's how you become successful. You don't want to go in every single time and start from scratch, right? We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We know what we need to do. It's just being able to see what's important, what's vital right now, and then how can we quickly do it and accomplish it.
Let's kind of talk about some of those phases of project management and specifically how simPRO software can be that helpful assistant to help them be a better project manager, all the way from, as we talked about, the initial design all the way through managing the installation to post installation. Talk about the areas of and purchasing the product. I could go on and on. You could really slice and
We
dice
could.
this a lot. Yeah.
There's
You
quite
know,
a lot to talk about here. When we were talking about the skills of a project manager, I think one that's becoming more and more relevant is somebody who understands the scope of everything that's available to them to use, all the tools that are out there, the softwares that are out there. Everybody uses something, whether it's a pen and paper, or people using email and their Google Calendar to keep track of things. Now people have other programs like Trello to keep track of all their tasks, or Google Drive to keep track of all their forms, their documents. So a good project manager is going to find ways to make his day easier. Now, what simPRO is able to offer is everything that I've mentioned, all the complexity around a project, all the communication that you have to do with your team, all the tracking that you have to do in Excel manually, all of the documents, the files that you collect, right? All of that can be in one system. Why would you want to jump around from your email to your phone back to a piece of paper from 3 weeks ago when it can all be in one place? It's going to, one, reduce headaches. It's going to save you a little bit of time so you're not having to jump around and find pieces of information. But it's also going to allow you to communicate better with your team. So simPRO has everything from that initial sale, right? Taking the vision of our sales team. What did they promise to our client? What is the design that they came up with? How do we take that and now actually execute on it? What do we need to communicate with our admin team in terms of billing, scheduling? What do we need to communicate in terms of our purchasing team? What do we have on hand? What do we need to order? When do we need to order it? All these things matter now, especially in the time of supply chain issues. Right? So simPRO is going to be able to allow you to take that from that initial sale, bring it on to the project manager's plate, manage every moving piece in one system, and then actually execute that vision and have day-to-day real-time updates. He's going to be able to see, he or she is going to be able to see what's the profitability of this job, what's been completed, how many hours have been used, what inventory has been installed, right? What do we have left to do? And listen, there's nothing worse than bad cash flow in a business. So they can also pass that information on to their billing team to let them know exactly what they need to bill the client for, so we remain cash flow positive.
you just mentioned something I think is important also. You mentioned like passing on to the billing team. The other, I think, advantage of this end-to-end software solution is we're not just talking about something that's improving the role of the project manager, but now you've got the sales team, you've got the marketing team, you've got the accounting team. Everybody else is feeding into the same piece of software.
Oh, yeah.
So you're not like, this isn't quote unquote a piece of project management software. That's just one portion of what the software does.
Exactly. And if you're talking about, I'll go back to my earlier analogy. A project manager is the conductor of the orchestra. But those teams we've talked about, the billing team, the scheduling team, purchasing and warehouse, or installation, they're all sitting in front row. Without them, this orchestra is not going to go well, right? Probably going to lose out on my bonus if these teams aren't able to operate efficiently either. So a bad project manager is someone who's going to be jumbling around for information, not have good information in front of them, be making decisions poorly. Because now you're going to frustrate these other teams. They don't know what needs to be done. They don't understand what needs to be built. Now we have delays. Our installation team is waiting because we didn't communicate to our purchasing department. So if we eliminate that and we give a project manager a tool to do his job well, you've now enabled every other department in your company to also do well. Right?
Talk about the management element of this in terms of analysis. So, you finished a project, you finished whatever, how many projects you've done the first 6 months of the year, the first quarter or a quarter. And the software will enable you to analyze, let's just say there's a trend that one particular one particular team, the man hours seem to be higher than the others on the same kind of job, or one particular salesperson's projects are not hitting the same profit margin as somebody else's. What are some of those specific kind of key metrics as a project manager that the software is going to be able to help them analyze their efficiency, like number of man hours, or again, individualized technician performance, things like that?
Good. So that's a really good point to bring up, especially considering we're not just a project management software. Now your entire team can operate out of simPRO. Your field team, they're working in simPRO's mobile app. They're tracking their hours. They're tracking their inventory, what's been consumed. Right? So now you have an understanding of how productive your team is in the field. When you assign certain jobs to them, how long does it take the first team to do it compared to the second team? Why does one team take longer? Where do we need to give them additional coaching? Right? Are there additional issues that we need to address? The beauty of all this is that no system is ever perfect. We can always improve and get better. If somebody has that thirst, that desire to improve their business, to keep it growing, to become more efficient, the software will give you all the reporting and the data that you want to take a look at to make those decisions. Right? But it all comes back to having the data to make that decision. If you don't have that, or if you have to sit and crunch all these numbers to get it, you're probably not going to do it.
Yeah, and that was one of my other questions. Was I think a lot of integrators who shun software usage are like, well, it's too time consuming. I got to plug in how many hours it was at the job. But if everybody has access to the software, so those technicians themselves are plugging in their tasks, what they achieved, they're plugging in what they did for the job. The purchasing manager is plugging in his information. It's not a situation where the project manager at the end of every day is having to stop at 3:30 to say, I got to spend the next 2 hours to review how far along we are on the Johnson project.
Yep. I can't tell you how many times I've talked to people. I have some clients in Texas. They have 3 locations that they work out of. And so now they have to relay information from each 3 offices. They have to figure out what billing is done, what inventory has been ordered, right? What's been done in the field. So as a project manager, I mean, come on, you're asking me to communicate to all these different teams, put all that information together, collect it, and then figure out what's been done, crunch my own numbers to make the decision for the next day. That's a hell of a process, you know? So having it all in one system, you eliminate that. You eliminate the manual work that I would need to do, but instead you empower me with real-time information so we can make those really good decisions on how to react or what to do next. And over time, you're going to start seeing, okay, where can we improve our process? Where can we try to offer feedback to our sales team? Project managers, they have a very difficult job trying to manage everything, and having it all in one software is going to enable the whole team to operate well. And now you have the opportunity to grow or scale your business.
Yeah, it might seem like minutia and busy work, but as you said, the long-term benefit of that data analysis to look at where you're failing and where you're improving and where you're winning is going to empower the business to grow and be more profitable. All right. Yeah. One last area. I talked about some of the, I'm sorry, go ahead, Param. Were you going to say something?
I was just going to say, all this stuff's already being done, right? People are tracking their time. People are billing their clients and getting all the information they need to write up an invoice. They're tracking their inventory and they're collecting their notes. It's all being done somehow. But if you're doing it all over the place, it becomes much harder. So the benefit, again, of having it in one software like simPRO is you're going to have a lot of time savings and a lot less headaches. So,
one last area. So what do you think is the biggest mistakes that you see project managers making? Is it just not utilizing the full potential of the software? Is it, um, uh, being too nice? I mentioned that one earlier. The being too nice and with maybe some of the subcontractors or other people they might be dealing with. What do you think is the biggest mistake, and what can they do to correct that?
I think the biggest mistake that they make is, forgetting to do the small things. It's not the stress of the whole project that can ruin it. It's rather forgetting to do the day-to-day communication with the team, checking in with your field staff to see how things went today. Does anything need to be adjusted? Was there a change order? Right? Small conversations like that are going to help a project manager understand what's actually happening with the boots on the ground and what we might need to change. Communicating back in the office with your billing or your inventory team. Hey, what's on hold? What's on back order? Or going back in to update some numbers, right? This was completed, or updating the client. It's just small things that can make a really big difference and can, ruin a client relationship. They can ruin that transition we talked about from once a project's completed now onto our service team, right? It's the small things that are going to start to form cracks in the project and in the business that will become much larger problems down the road.
We talked earlier about the profile of what this project manager, should or shouldn't look like. And it's interesting because I know a company where several years back, they specifically hired architectural students, females, to be their project managers. They hired 2 project managers, women out of architectural school who were highly organized. That was really their highly organized and skilled at interfacing with not only the customer but the other trades, and then also keeping everybody on point, but not necessarily the technical experts. And It was interesting, and they thrived. It said it was the best decision they ever made. And, I know a dozen years later, one of those female project managers is still with the company and still doing really, really well with the company. So when you look at, it's hard to paint a profile, but it can be in any sizes here. And you talked about some of the strengths and weaknesses, but that project manager can come from all sorts of different areas, and as long as they're willing to be open to use the software and open to this organizational skill, which I'm going to put words in your mouth, that I think is probably the most highly sought after element of being a good project manager, then they can thrive in this role. And what integrators might want to look for when they're hiring a project manager.
I agree. I think you can teach somebody who's willing to learn and willing to grow the technical stuff. They'll learn how to work in the industry and the right words to say to people and how to, get the job done. But the things you can't really teach or develop quickly are things like organization. You can't teach somebody how to be detailed and how to piece things together. These are intangible skills that do take time, and you have to break a lot of bad habits if you don't have these skills. So I think it's a great decision by the firm to hire people that already have that. They're architecture students. They go through a lot of work and a lot of studying that teaches them how to, again, take something very large and complex and now break it into small, organized chunks so they can actually attack.
So we talked about the various phases of an installation and how the software, starts long before the installation process happens. Then, of course, the installation. Now we come to the post-installation where the monitoring and the service of that account takes place. How does the simPRO software help an integrator manage that portion of the client interaction?
So once the project is complete, you've now just went in, installed a lot of equipment that you want to keep track of for warranty, for monitoring. You want to bill the client and get them signed on to an agreement for some monthly RMR. Right? Because you're doing it all in one system, simPRO is going to let you know exactly what you need to keep track of, what information you need to collect on it, serial numbers, where you installed it, how often you need to come and do maintenance on it. And it'll also allow you to build in that reoccurring billing. So now once a project manager has done his job, all the work that him and his team completed can simply be passed on to our service team. Anytime the client calls us up, there's an issue, all the data is already right there for us. We don't need to go and dig into somebody's history. We don't need to bother somebody and give them a phone call. It'll all live in simPRO. So now that we can actually service this client and continue to maintain that relationship that we built from the project manager. It's about being able to grow it and have them as a lifelong customer rather than just for a short period of time. So,
all right, great conversation on the role of project management. What should an integrator do who wants to find out more about simPRO?
Reach out to us. You can go onto our website, simprogroup.com, or you can reach out to me. My name again is Param Singh. My email is param.singh@simpro.us. Reach out to us. I'd love to talk to you, understand a little bit more about the business and how, again, what kind of work you take on, how you complete that work, and see how simPRO could help.
All right, Param Singh, thank you for joining the Security Speaking podcast today.
Of course, Jason. Thank you again for your time.